Now, the next session we have is the panel, and I'd like to ask Clarence to join us at the panel table, please. And the panel is going to be around the topic of business prowess this morning. It will be chaired by our eternal chairwoman, Linda Woods. Thank you, Linda. I'd like to introduce our second panellist, though, Ruth Drinkwater. Ruth, if you'd like to make your way to the panel table, please. Ruth is the Director of the Australian Association of Angel Investors. She holds an extensive knowledge and understanding of investment at early commercialisation stage and in start-up companies across a wide range of industry sectors. Ruth brings a strong background in due diligence, technology transfer and portfolio management with experience in investment, product development, value building, global strategic planning and management of technology. She has worked with approximately 50 technology-based and entrepreneurial startup companies through their incubation phase in recent years. Please welcome Ruth to the panel. Thank you. Our third panel member is Jeff McDermott. If we can have Jeff make your way to the table, please. Jeff is current board member and company secretary for a number of private companies and unlisted public companies, covering a broad spectrum of industries, including intelligent property, human resources, property, mining, investment and tourism infrastructure. Some of the board positions he has held include managed investment scheme with assets in excess of $120 million, a property development company with turnover of over $160 million, a property investment company, a microwave-based technology company, and a hovercraft development and manufacturing company, just to name a few. Currently a board member of the Gold Coast Innovation Centre, a strategic advisor to the Vice-Chancellor Griffith University, and a member of Gold Coast City Council's Business Advisory Board, a member of the executive and a board member of the AB Patterson College. Jeff is also a founding director of Founders Forum. If you can welcome Jeff, please. Now, as mentioned, I'd like to welcome Linda Woods. Linda is the Private Clients Investment Advisor with RBS Morgans, and I'll hand over to Linda.
Thank you, Suzette. And we do have a microphone on the table for you, Ruth. Fantastic. Look, I suppose let's just sort of start with the basics. And innovation and integrating innovation in business is really important, but why is that so important to us here on the Gold Coast? Why are we here this morning, and why do we need to really focus on this and understand it and learn a hell of a lot better? The main reason for that I see from where I sit at RBS Morgans is that we do have a big shift going on around the world with where we actually generate our income. No surprise, you're going to hear about it at 7 o'clock tonight, whether you like it or not. It'll be blasted all around how we are not making as much money from the industries that we once did. Now, and a couple of us that are nowhere near my age in the room, I am 27, a few of you are a little bit older than me, would remember back to the old living off the back of the sheep days. Okay, so if you remember that, or those that don't would remember hearing about that at school, life has changed. We're going to be concreted with that theory tonight. Take it on board. This is your opportunity to become innovative, to think outside the square. The sectors that we consider, and I'm sure Dr. Tam would agree with me in this, Australia has an incredible opportunity to build our revenue based on services, technology, healthcare, education. Am I correct? Yeah, good. Oh, good. Makes me sound good. Suddenly my credibility has lifted. So we really do need to focus on this today. And what I'd really like to start with is Jeff, because Jeff, you're involved with the Innovation Centre, and that's where it actually can evolve from here on the Gold Coast. Can you just explain a little bit more about the Gold Coast Innovation Centre, please? You've got a microphone in front of you.
Sure. Gold Coast Innovation Centre is jointly or co-funded by Griffith University, Gold Coast City Council and state government. 75, 150 grand each for a year. The whole idea is to have start-up ventures and mentor them, grow them, make them investment ready, access angel investor or more institutional funding, access federal government grants and state government grants for research and development. We're quietly chuffed about, well, not quietly, loudly chuffed about what we've been able to achieve. In the middle of the GFC, you know, the little thing based out at Griffith University, we've graduated 30 companies. Those companies and the current undergraduates, if you want to call them that, we have raised about 8 million capital. It's not just from GCIC, but our clients, and Andrew, our CEO, is here, and a lot of it, the credit goes to him. That about 8 million from venture capital angel investors. We've got another 8 million from federal government and state government grants. 16 million, all of which has been spent on the Gold Coast, essentially. And the unfortunate thing is, and I'll put a plug in this, we're struggling to get our recurrent funding from the state government and Gold Coast City Council. It beggars belief, and I hear Clarence talk about that offshore one off the state. Goodness gracious me. There was a wealth of opportunities that must be there. I'm envious.
Yep. And look, building on that, Ruth, so we've got the opportunity here. You deal with the people that come through you as angel investors. So what are the opportunities at that end of people looking for these ideas and wanting to invest in them? Is there scope?
There's huge scope. And the challenge we have is that those who are there are investing a huge amount, as much as they possibly can. A real challenge is that we don't have enough people who are prepared to do that. I mean, angel investors are people who use their own money, and it's not all of their own money, it's only a portion of their own money, to invest in innovation and companies, to actually get a return at some point in time. They don't do it for philanthropic reasons, they actually do it for a return on investment. We've got venture capital firms out there, and I have found over the last several years that our real challenge is that we don't actually acknowledge what venture capital funding is and what angel funding is. They're two very different things. VC, or venture capital, has become synonymous with venture capital firms who invest other people's money, and they're way up the chain from startup and innovation. They are only investing in businesses that are making a profit already. They're out there, they're in the community. They're not doing startups anymore, which is where the real innovation occurs. We don't have enough angel investors. We need more in Australia. And getting people to change the way they think and how they invest, that's actually a basic cultural, personal change. And we really need to do that, because this is the time to invest in innovation. The opportunities are significant.
Yeah, and the cost of capital is cheap. So building on that, and I think that's something that we can all take away today, is that we can actually do a cultural change and take it back to our workplace, and we can start this morning. So in order to do that, we need to take that leap of faith. So Clarence, I'm sure you'll help with your experience here. That, you know, if we look at a couple of examples where we as employers, managers, bosses, whatever, create an environment where the staff and everybody around you can come up with an innovative idea. Now imagine if the paperclip or the post-it note hadn't been taken on board. But what are the challenges that you've come across, and you've worked in a variety of industries, where you present an idea or someone presents something innovative or change? What are some of the challenges that they're up against?
Well, I think the main challenge is that you got to separate the fact that an innovator may not be an entrepreneur.
Yep.
And the other issue that we have in Australia and most parts of the world, the only place that you don't see that is basically Israel and US, is that the acceptance of failure. If you don't allow people to fail, you're not going to allow them to innovate, because nobody there to take the risk. You know, if you want to read about how innovation that would basically innovative ideas that were brought up and failed, read the book Fumbling the Future, you know, about Xerox. I mean, they're the guys that came up with the mouse, with the graphic user interface, and Steve Jobs visited them and stole the whole, well, picked the ideas off and commercialize it. So that's a clear example. Just to add on to the point that they, you know, that have been raised by Ruth and Jeff. One of the things I wanted to share with you guys is a solution that one of the Singularity staff came up with for Chile. I'm not sure you guys heard of Startup Chile. Chile is one of the least corrupted government in the Latin American countries, and it's a bit like Australia. They're the world's largest copper mine. They wanted to diversify and become innovative, and they thought, well, we will build a technology park like what Malaysia has done, what Singapore has done, what China has done. And the Singularity guy said, don't do that, because buildings don't make innovation. It's people. So what they did was they essentially set aside. They invite applicants from around the world. So any of you with a great idea that can find funding, you can apply to Startup Chile. If your idea is good, they will fund you and give you $40,000. The only proviso is that you have to move to Chile for 6 months. That's it. After that, you can leave. And why do that? Well, they've been running for 5 years and been very successful. Not all the companies were successful, but the program was successful. Because when you bring a bunch of really innovative people together, like you guys out here, right? Spending your time out here this morning to listen to us, as opposed to sleeping in. Essentially, what's happened is, they will do their own thing. They will have their own tech startup weekends. They will innovate, and they will come together and form founders forum and stuff like that. And then when you go back to your home country, when a Chilean wants to do a deal or whatever, they say, "Oh, I remember Ruth from Australia. I can call her up and find a way to get our markets in there." So I think that's the issue. And the other challenge, obviously, is that our population is really small. We don't have a natural market, and we have to be, have leverage on technology to go into the global space.
Yeah, and our global opportunity is
Yes.
Asia,
Yep.
which is right on our doorstep. Ruth, you made a note there, but I guess you've got some point to make. But I gather too the networking and the groups. We saw that as a little experiment that we held at the Angel Forum, where we had a guest speaker sitting on his own and how he felt as opposed to the rest of the panel and how they felt collaborating ideas. I mean, you would see that, and how far does that take the business even further?
That's actually the power of it. And it's that collaboration that I don't think we do very well in Australia, really. We're still competing. We compete and try and reinvent the wheel, and you see it every day. And I'm not going to name a few very, very notable occurrences of that recently. But everybody seems to want to pin their hat on something that they think's a new idea. I think Andrew was mentioning earlier that he went to a conference that's all about open data. Well, okay, people are throwing money at sponsoring conferences on open data at the moment. Well, so what? We all live with open data every day. They're missing the point. A lot of governments and a lot of parts of the community want to be seen to be doing something, and they're tinkering at the edges and they're potentially talking about it, but none of us are actually addressing the fundamentals. Startup Chile, there's Startup America. And I think, Andrew, you were at the ACA conference recently, and people in the international forum over there were absolutely astounded that there is no stimulation in Australia for this activity. We don't have a Startup Australia.
Pretty sad. Jeff,
It is.
do you want to add to that?
I shake my head, nod my head. The one reason why I think the Gold Coast is successful in incubating technologies is our environment. The birds sing and the sky is blue, and you don't have a lot of urban congestion, 20-minute commutes. But apart from that, I think the reason why people like Ruth and the angel investors is you invest for the money, yes. You permit people to fail, yes, and you get some benefit at the outside for the ones that succeed. But the reason I play in this space a lot is I love dealing with off-the-wall intellects, people that create, think differently. And when you're with them and you get infected by their enthusiasm and their passion for something, and it's almost psychic income. You go for a wonderful ride. You crash from time to time, but it's fun along the way, is it not, Clarence? This whole concept of Startup Chile, I gnash my teeth, and I've obviously pulled my hair out, but with the lack of that capacity within Australia. Andrew was doing wonderful things at GCIC. This, intellectual property-based business incubator on a shoestring, and we're struggling to get funding. And this, I think, Clarence hit on the head. You've got to permit people to fail. Governments don't like fingers being pointed at. You put some money in that, and there was some failures. And there is this political correctness, this precautionary principle, which is killing it.
Okay,
I'll
well
get
that's...
I'll get off
And,
the soapbox.
and yeah, please, Ruth, yeah.
It's all about risk, I think. People, I don't think we accept risk very well. And I think Clarence was talking about earlier about Richard Branson saying, I'll only look at technology that works, that's proven. Well, where does innovation start? It starts with an idea, it starts with a whole range of tests, and that's how you actually prove that it works. But gee whiz, it's the concept and the potential and getting the group around and the collaborative group around that person who has that wonderful idea and actually proving that it actually works. That's the critical thing. And if we can't get from A to B, we're never going to have the Richard Bransons of the world investing.
Yeah.
And it's this gap that we have to address.
And based on that too, you know, a name that you mentioned, James Cameron, he had enormous amount of resistance because he wanted to bring 3D technology into the marketplace. And I would not even want to think what his bank balance is, but he's done quite well. Now, he's an innovator. He actually started as a set designer, production designer in the movies, and said, I think of a different way we can do this. And in the movie business itself, when you're on set, if you are not innovative, you do not have a job. If you are just there to do a job, you will not be employed more than one film. Get out of our way, you're wasting our time and space. You must be innovative and creative or you don't fit in. They have to constantly reinvent the wheel, and I'm sure you can think of some of your sci-fi films that you think, where did they get that idea from? And then it is actually NASA that stole their concepts, not the other way around. And I'm sure Clarence would agree with me on that. But James himself had enormous difficulty to his own industry that 3D would work. And it was only really when he was in Beijing and they re-released Titanic in 3D, and in one weekend in China, they outdid box office of Titanic, the old Titanic, this is last year, in 3D, outdid the whole rest of world revenue in one weekend because they put it in 3D. So it gives you a concept of, even though you can be wealthy and you can be successful, we've still got this mentality of resistance to change. Clarence.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the other thing we should address is the education system, you know, in terms of creativity and so on. If you haven't seen Sir Ken Robertson's talks, you know, on TED or on his website, I really encourage you to do so. I mean, one of the things that we're looking at is, you know, like how do you engage kids? How do you educate kids in this day and age? To a 3-year-old growing up right now, a magazine is nothing more than an iPad that does not work, right? You see kids going on the TV and trying to do that. And that's how it's going to be. And the thing is, I don't know about you guys, but, you know, my daughter is here, but my son, you know, he's into gaming. He's learning team collaboration, right? He's playing some kind of a game with all his mates. He's watching the TV, he's listening to music, he's on Facebook, he's on Twitter, I don't know. I mean, you know, he's doing multiple stuff, keeping my wife away from the computer. So he's doing multiple stuff, and he's learning, and he's, you know, and being creative, really. Because why do we like games? Because it's problem solving. We by nature like to solve problems. That's where we are right now today. But we also like to be rewarded quickly. But when you go to school, what happens? You got a teacher speaking, and you got the student having to listen. If they don't listen and they fidget on their computer or whatever, what happened? We say they have ADHD. We drug them. So they shut off all the other senses so they can only concentrate on the teacher. Now tell me, if you do that, how does that create creativity? I mean, it kind of, you know, stops it. And obviously, I mean, the more research needs to be done in this area. But the thing is, I think the education system needs to be totally revamped in terms of encouraging creativity. And in my slides, I actually show you one of this stuff on crowdsourcing. One of the most successful crowdsourcing and gamifying is Folded. I don't know whether you heard of Folded. Folded is a game that was created at University of Washington to try and help, try and get the crowd, the public, to try and help them solve a problem, creating a protein that can basically kill the HIV virus. The team at University of Washington spent $12 million in 18 months, couldn't get anything going. Somebody had a bright idea like, well, folding proteins like Rubik's Cube. And humans are very good at solving these kind of problems. Why don't we put it out there, teach them how to fold proteins, and if they can find a correct folding procedure, they can find a potential drug that will kill the HIV virus. So the best protein folder in the world right now from this crowdsourcing game is not a scientist. I don't think she even has a degree. She's actually a PA in UK. So you don't know who's going to find a cure for cancer, a cure for AIDS. It's no longer just a scientist. It could be a layman out there with a skill that we need, but we're not, giving them a chance to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And building on that, Jeff, you've run many businesses. You've seen a lot of different management styles in place. What's something that everyone can take away today from a management style to create an opportunity so the PA in the business, anyone inside any business can feel free to come forward with an idea? Because an idea that we're talking about that whole change of mentality in a workplace. It's not a matter of thinking that everybody is going to, solve AIDS. But there's so many other problems to be solved, like I said before, paper clips, post-it notes, How do you foster that environment inside an everyday workplace?
Well, what we did in my old firm was that we engaged every staff member in the planning for the business, and how we kicked that off was basically saying there's no such thing as a bad idea, because your idea may start here, then it sparks other people off, and you may end up over here, and that's a better result than here, but that doesn't mean that was a bad idea. So there's no such thing as a bad idea. And then permit failure. Clarence it's almost a mantra. People can fail, but only fail once at the same thing.
Hopefully.
But you've got to stretch always, and what we always then did is always promote people or ask them to do things beyond their capacity. Mm-hmm. So I used to always say, if you haven't got sweaty armpits, you're not trying. So you're not growing. So you need to have sweaty armpits, sweat on the brow to grow.
So that balance, so you're not pushing them over the edge.
Sure.
But have you seen situations where someone comes up with a great idea and the manager takes credit when it works?
Well, we try to discourage that, but the idea is you give credit where credit is due. Yeah. And I'm a firm believer in brickbats and bouquets. Bouquets before the brickbats. And if someone does a damn good job, hold them up and say, this is an example. This person has taken this place, this firm to there, and they are getting rewarded, remunerated accordingly. That's an example for you to follow. You don't hide it. You don't. If they stumble, you don't kick them while they're down. You pick them back up again. It's all about fostering growth and the capacity to think.
But innovation doesn't always have to end up in a result of someone put up on a pedestal.
No.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. It's collaborative. There's a whole team approach, and as a consequence, we used to share the profits on the basis that it wasn't. Everything we did was ultimately a team effect. Team effort. The fact that someone answered the phone within 4 rings, calls were made back within an hour. There was a smile at the end of the voice. And there could have been some leaders amongst the group, but the reality was the results we achieved could not have been achieved if it wasn't a team effort. And so you blend, you laud the successes, you point out the mistakes and see how they can be remedied, but you don't labour the mistakes. Mm-hmm. You just move on.
I know Ruth took some notes and probably got something to say, but I'm going to just go to Clarence Wall just on that point for a moment. Taking that type of work environment and mentality of managers and business owners and operators, is this something we should be thinking about at the recruitment level? Yeah,
definitely. And I'm glad I had the opportunity to make a point here, because on one of my other slides, I want to share with you how the head of Google Skunk Works do management on innovation. This is Astro Teller. His grandfather was Edward Teller, the guy that helped develop the atomic bomb. And his other grandfather is another Nobel Prize winner in physics. And his name really is Astro Teller. But what he told us at Google is amazing. I mean, as you know, recruiting in Google takes like 8 months. And everybody in there is like super smart. And I love Google, they have this policy that you cannot be more than 150 feet from food and drinks from any office. And food is an important feature of my life. So anyway, the interesting thing he said was that if an engineer comes up to him with an innovative idea at Google, he says, hey mate, here's a 6 months bonus, forget it. I mean, this is a real, counterintuitive idea, right? I'm like, why? I mean, this guy is, like the top people that you selected, and he came up with an idea and he's saying, forget it. He said, if the guy is passionate about it, he will do it anyways. If he's not, I do not want to spend 6 months of resource, of team and money and so on. And then after 6 months, he comes back and says, well, it doesn't work, move on to the next idea. So failure, but failure with some kind of, you've got to make sure the person is actually passionate about it. He tried his best and he failed. Not because, at the whimsical, point of his life that he wants to do something and you just let him do it. And then, that's how Google controls it, because everybody in there is innovative.
Yep, absolutely. And I think, have a look at your own workplace when you get back to work in the morning. You'll be there in about an hour, and have a look around and see if you can think who might be those quiet achievers, innovators in your own office. If they're not given an opportunity to share their ideas and their creativity, they will probably walk. Interesting. Funny, you never get that out of them when you do the exit interview, but something to be aware of. Ruth, I saw you take a few notes there.
Well, basically, it's just my thought process and following Clarence's earlier linear thinking. We don't think to the side. We don't think out of the box enough. I think in the workplace we are focused on getting the job done. Even if you put efforts in place to actually encourage those sorts of things, unless it becomes a habit, and it takes us 14 times of doing something before things become a habit.
21.
21, is it? There you go. So that has to be constantly reinforced to make it a habit and to change the culture in a workplace. And usually what happens, you're talking about other people taking the credit. Well, I've reached the point in my life where I don't care who takes the credit anymore as long as it happens. You're always going to have leaders, you're always going to have followers. And it's actually recognising that in a team. My biggest beef with recruiters is that they have no concept of that. They look at a CV, and how many people look at CVs and will actually see what drives a person? Are they innovative? Are they creative? Are they entrepreneurial? Are they followers? Are they leaders? How is this person going to fit into a team? They look at the actual bits.
They don't look at the behavioural psychology.
They do not look at that. And that is an enormous problem in our recruiting industry. And it sort of leads, well, how on earth does business then recruit appropriately for particular teams?
Well, from my point of view, when I look to see if I'm employing people, first thing I go to the bottom of the CV and see their extracurricular activity. That tells me a lot about that person. If they have been a captain of a school team, if they've been a marathon runner, if they've been in the creative arts, if they've actually worked at McDonald's and stayed there for a long time, that tells me a lot about the stickability, the customer relations, the ability to lead, the ability to go through the pain barrier, whole sorts of that personal things which I'd much prefer than just the academics. The academics, everyone can get a grade 5 average, not everyone, but grade 5 averages are pretty standard and above. And so academe is one thing, credentials is another thing. You can learn to do jobs, but you don't necessarily do them as well as you could if you don't have that creative impulse, that creative ability, that leadership genes, that pain barrier, going the extra mile type stuff, which is what we all want as our employers. And that's what entrepreneurs do. They go through the pain barrier, blood, sweat and tears. And then the filthy old investor comes along and tries to take their ideas from them. This is where Andrew and the angel investors, their role is to try and marry that proprietary, the idea that the entrepreneur has, and he's got to share it with others, because without the investors fertilising that seed will wither and die. And that's always been a challenge, has it not, Andrew? One of the reasons why Andrew rejects some people from GCIC, he makes an assessment, this person is not prepared to share. He's not prepared to give up something to go to the next level. And that's part of the challenge, constantly.
Just while you were saying about pain and kids working at McDonald's, it made me think of last night, Subway, one of those sorts of chains where kids work after school, and I'm sure a couple of them went through a bit of pain last night at Main Beach because the subway burnt down. You'll probably see it in today's paper. But yeah, sorry, Bruce.
I was just going to add to that. It's being willing to be mentored. And I think when we look at entrepreneurs, you want to actually see the creative ones, those who are really, they have the thought, they understand that it's not going to be just them, that gets it to the end point, that they need to persevere, they need to have that resilience and that strength, and they need to be willing to be mentored. Because investors look at how do we build a team around this? We're not the ones who are actually going to commercialise this. We will help and we'll facilitate and we'll open doors and we'll mentor along the way, but somebody has to live and breathe and dream and do everything with that innovation. And that, while it is on that one entrepreneur to actually build all that and to drive it, they're not doing it on their own. They have a base behind them and a team behind them. That's the key.
no different to a successful manager of any business as well.
You're right.
Allowing yourself to be tested, to be prodded, but more importantly to be mentored by the right people around you, and to thank them and acknowledge them, and always strive to have those right people around you. Well, I think time-wise we do need to leave it there, but I did find some lessons from the private sector on innovation, and I came across this. IBM, their keyword is collaborate. Genentech is take risks. GE, which is General Electric, provide innovation training. Virgin, which is Virgin Worldwide, is challenge the status quo. Disney is empower your people. And Google, I like this one, make time to play. But they all pride themselves on being innovative and encouraging and fostering that. And you can see where they've taken their companies around the world. So, ladies and gentlemen, for this morning, please thank Dr. Clarence Tan, Ruth Drinkwater and Jeff McDermott, and I'll hand you back to Suzette Sutton. Please give them a round of applause and thank them for this morning.